Thank you everyone as always for being here. As I mentioned at the beginning, my dad is taking a short summer break. So I'm going to share a short thought to carry us into Shabbat. And it's about the Shema, the first paragraph of which appears in this week's portion, the Et Hanan. Shema is, of course, a central prayer and a link in the generational chain of Jews throughout the ages. It was just last week when I was standing with a group of young people on a trip to the National Holocaust Museum near Nottingham. And as we recited the Shema at the Children's Memorial, I recalled a chilling account about Adolf Eichmann. In 1960, when Israel captured Eichmann in Argentina, the man who oversaw the operation was Issa Harel, who worked for the Mossad. And Harel described a moment during Eichmann's trial back in Israel when Eichmann suddenly called out, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Totally shocked, they asked him, how do you know those words? And he replied, what do you think I heard Jews say in the camps? This prayer has been recited by Jews through thick and thin, but why? What makes it stand out as the prayer that most Jews know? Why has it become the go-to Jewish prayer? I think there are two key elements of the Shema which make it the main Jewish prayer. The first is the word Shema, which means to hear rather than to see. There was a fundamental difference between the two civilizations that shaped the culture of the West, ancient Greece and ancient Israel. The Greeks were the supreme masters of the visual arts, art, sculpture, architecture, and the theater. For Jews, on the other hand, the sole object of worship is invisible. God cannot be seen, but only heard. And so the Greeks worshipped what they saw, while Israel worshipped what they heard. Hearing that voice of God is key to our religion, and the Shema emphasizes that. The second feature of the Shema is mathematical. The prayer contains 245 words. When praying at Shul, the Chazan leading the service adds 3 words, Adonai Elohechem Emet, at the end of the Shema. And if a person's not praying at Shul, but they're at home as an individual, then they add 3 words at the beginning of the Shema, which are El Melech Ne'eman. By adding these 3 words, either at the end, if we're at Shul, or at the beginning, if we're at home, the total number of words in the Shema is now 248. And that's significant because there are 248 limbs in our body. So the Shema becomes the prayer which represents the idea of our whole body being invested and involved in our religion. Abraham was the first Jew to actively serve God with his entire being. The numerical value of his Hebrew name, Avraham, is 248. Similarly, the numerical value, the gematria of the word Bamidbar in the wilderness, where the Jewish people spent 40 years, is also 248, because it was in the desert that the Jewish nation first discovered what it means to actively engage in Judaism with every fiber of their being. Shema is the prayer which reminds us every day that in our religion, we think about God. In our religion, we talk about faith, but most of all, the defining feature of Judaism is to actively live and demonstrate our Jewish values in a physical way with all our limbs, and to engage in an energized, hands-on Jewish experience, the South Hampstead way. And with Alan here, I would say the South Hampstead Cheder way, with a hands-on Jewish education. Some of you may know the great artistic gymnast, Agnes Keleti. She's been in the news recently. Agnes is from Hungary. She miraculously survived the Holocaust, and her story is remarkable. As the Nazis overran Hungary, most of Agnes's family were taken to concentration and death camps. Somehow she managed to buy the ID papers of a Christian girl who was around the same age as her. And with these false papers, Agnes escaped to a remote village where no one knew her. And she worked under the guise of a Christian maid. After the Holocaust, she returned to Budapest and began to rebuild her career as a gymnast. In 1952, at the age of 31, she won gold at the Helsinki Olympics as a gymnast, unheard of for a 31-year-old. In 1956, she went on again to win gold in Melbourne, now aged 35. And due to unrest in Hungary at the time with the Soviets, Agnes didn't return to Hungary after the Melbourne Games. Instead, she went to Israel, where she lived for many years and became a gymnastic coach. Today, she lives back in Hungary. And as the Tokyo Olympics begins, she is being celebrated as the oldest Olympic champion alive. In fact, the oldest Olympian, full stop, alive, at the age of 100. So there's something to aim for. Agnes, to my mind, is a person who has lived her life by the values of the Shema. She never gave up on hearing that internal voice of faith, tradition, and determination. And when it comes to using her 248 limbs as an expression of the way she lives her life, well, she fought for her faith and passions with everything she had. And by the way, at 100 years old, she still does cartwheels. May the Shema give us all the strength to go for gold in our own lives. Shabbat Shalom and enjoy the Olympics.